Lillian signed her name on the exit confidentiality agreement, and the staff member across from her confirmed once again, "Ms. Lillian, are you absolutely certain you wish to participate in this cross-border peacekeeping mission? Our records show you have a husband and children. Once your information is confirmed, you must exit the country in secret and will no longer be able to contact any family members." Lillian paused her pen for a moment, then smoothly completed the final stroke of her signature. "I confirm. As for my family," as if thinking of something, Lillian smiled with a hint of coldness in her expression. "They will definitely be very supportive." Receiving this response, the staff member nodded and handed Lillian a ticket that contained no personal information, only the departure time and location. Then, "Please arrive at the airport on time. We wish you a pleasant life." Walking out of the office building. The heavy rain continued outside. Lillian got into the car holding an umbrella, but her clothes still ended up soaked in one area. "It's really miserable to go out in this kind of weather." The driver couldn't help but sigh. Lillian nodded in agreement, looking at the rain curtain, but couldn't help remembering how just a few days ago, despite her high fever, she had braved the heavy rain to deliver stomach medicine to Harvey. The rain that day was even heavier than now. She carefully protected the porridge and medicine in her arms, making sure not a single drop got them wet. But when she arrived, a group of people stared at her as if she were a monkey. Someone said they had lost a bet, never expecting anyone could deliver something within 20 minutes in such weather, and they were willing to accept their defeat. Lillian only then realized she had been used as a bet in a wager, her face burning and stinging as if she had been slapped hard. She looked at Harvey in confusion and embarrassment, but the man didn't even glance her way, his eyes fixed solely on the woman seated beside him, Mandy, a woman Lillian had seen on Harvey's desk, on his phone screensaver, and on his office desk. But Lillian had never imagined she would meet Mandy under such circumstances. Mandy sat composedly beside Harvey, draped in his coat, while she herself was drenched, her hair still dripping with cold rainwater. Mandy gave a friendly smile instead, pulling out a few tissues and handing them over. "This is your housekeeper, right, coming out to deliver things in such heavy rain. Yang, you must remember to give her a raise when you get back." Lillian, her mind went blank, but her body moved faster than her thoughts, directly slapping away Mandy's outstretched hand. With a light slap, though soft, it suddenly silenced the noisy private room. What followed was a powerful shove. She was Harvey pushed hard to the ground, her head hitting the edge of the glass coffee table with a heavy thud. Then, when she woke up, she had already been taken to the hospital, her head wrapped in layers of gauze. But the hospital bed was empty, with no one around. Her husband Harvey wasn't here, her son Julian wasn't here either. She clearly had family, yet she had been lying alone in the hospital for so long, isolated and solitary. Lillian opened her phone, aside from spam messages from her mobile carrier. There was no one who cared enough to send her a message. Lillian suddenly felt her eyes sting, suppressing the urge to cry. She called Julian. She no longer expected Harvey to care about her, she just wanted to see Julian, the child she carried for 10 months, bound to her by blood. The phone rang for a long time before it was answered. Lillian, as if clutching at her last lifeline, tried to speak, but what she heard was Mandy's gentle voice. "Sorry. Julian is shopping right now and can't answer the phone." Lillian froze, then hysterically demanded that she let Julian answer the phone. "Mandy wants to get back together with Harvey." Lillian could ignore that, but Julian couldn't. Mandy spoke in a pitying tone. "Your hysterical behavior will only make Julian dislike you even more. Why don't you listen?" The voice on the other end grew louder, as Mandy had put it on speakerphone. "Julian, come over quickly." "Thank you, Mandy. Mandy is so good to me, the best person in the world. Really, even better than your mom. My mom would never take me to an amusement park, nor would she buy me so many snacks. All she does is brew those soups and stews at home, forcing me and my dad to drink them. They taste like spoiled water, absolutely disgusting." Julian's voice faded into the distance, and Lillian's heart felt hollow. Only then did she hear Mandy's pitying voice, though it might sound harsh to say this. A woman who stays at home all day, using household chores that anyone could do to emotionally blackmail her husband and children, is truly pitiable, don't you think? Later, whatever else Mandy said, Lillian could no longer recall clearly. All she remembered was how cold she felt at that moment, as if all the blood in her body was freezing, leaving her stiff and unable to move. When she woke up again, the nurse told her that she had fallen into a high fever and lost consciousness. Fortunately, she was already in the hospital, or she might have ended up with brain damage from the fever. Lillian smiled faintly. If she really did become mentally impaired from the fever, Harvey and Julian would probably be delighted. Lillian didn't attempt to contact anyone else. She obediently followed the treatment plan, and after being discharged from the hospital, she immediately went to complete the procedures to become a cross-border peacekeeping doctor. Since Harvey and Julian were convinced that her sacrifices were just a way to emotionally manipulate them with self-righteous devotion, she would give them back their freedom. Lillian took a car back to Kyle's house. Unlike usual, she didn't busy herself with preparing medicinal meals, but went straight to the bedroom. Lillian rummaged for a while and found the storage box where she kept her important items. Upon opening it, she saw the bright red marriage certificate placed in the most prominent position. Lillian opened it and took a look, then couldn't help but drift into thought. The photo on the marriage certificate was photoshopped together. At that time, Harvey was severely injured in a car accident, unconscious, and had become a vegetative state. Upon hearing this devastating news, Lillian resolutely gave up her government-funded study abroad opportunity and went to Kyle's home to serve as his personal physician, taking care of his daily needs around the clock. She married Harvey during the second year of his coma, when other members of the Kyle family were growing restless and began scheming to divide up the family assets that rightfully belonged to Harvey. To protect what was his, Lillian went alone to complete the marriage registration with Harvey. During that period, in addition to providing him with acupuncture treatments, she had to find time to outmaneuver those watchful uncles who were eyeing their chance. For the next 3 years, over 1,000 days and nights, she personally administered his massages and acupuncture every day. Even when Harvey's closest relatives had given up hope, she gritted her teeth and persevered. Just when Lillian thought life would continue like this, he suddenly woke up. After waking up, Harvey accepted the marriage. He promised to fulfill a husband's duties. Even though he didn't love her, Lillian didn't mind. Ever since Harvey chased away those bullies who tormented her, she knew she had fallen for him. So, even if this marriage lacked passionate love and only offered companionship as plain as water, she was content. Lillian thought such days would last forever, that she would accompany Harvey until the end of her life, but Mandy's return shattered the balance of everything, even causing the usually indifferent Harvey to break his promise over it. Thinking of Harvey and Julian's subtly dismissive attitude toward her, Lillian smiled wryly. Putting down the marriage certificate, Lillian began looking through the other documents, which included the properties, jewelry, and shares that old Master Shun had gifted to her, assets he had specifically left as her security. Lillian had originally planned to give everything to Julian once he came of age, but since she had resolved to leave, she naturally didn't want to remain entangled with the Kyle family over these assets. Lillian called Julian and decided to give these things to him as a final gift. "Julian, come home, Mom has something very important to discuss with you." Julian's voice sounded somewhat distant. "Got it." After hanging up the phone, Lillian tidied up the documents. Just then, she heard the sound of the door opening from outside. Lillian walked out, only to see Harvey followed by Mandy. She was holding Julian's hand, her expression so natural it was as if this weren't Lillian's home but hers. Julian saw Lillian, his eyes darting away as he quickly clung to Mandy's leg. Mandy soothingly patted Julian's back. "Sorry," Julian said he was scared, so he insisted I come back with him. Lillian, you don't mind, do you?" Lillian's eyes fell on Julian, but he didn't even glance at her, as if afraid Lillian would rush over and snatch him away. Lillian took a deep breath. Reminding herself he was still young and not to leave a bad impression on the child at the last moment, she forced herself to calm down and said, "Julian, I need to speak with you alone." Lillian did not want these assets to give Mandy any opportunity to get her hands on them. In the future, Harvey might even have children with Mandy, and by then, Julian's situation would become very awkward. These things were also the last safeguard she left for Julian, at least ensuring that he would never have to worry about food and clothing or be troubled by financial matters in the future. It could be considered a worthy conclusion to their mother-son relationship. But when Julian heard this, it was as if he had heard something terrifying. He shook his head desperately, saying, "Dad, Mandy, I won't go, I won't go, I want to stay with you. You promised me you wouldn't let her take me away." Julian's attitude left Lillian stunned. Watching the child crying as if his heart were breaking, she clenched her hands tightly, her nails digging into her palms. "Julian, if Mom said she has something very important to give you, wouldn't you even be willing to spend a few minutes with me?" Julian was still crying. "I don't want anything you give me. I just want to stay with Dad. You go, you go." During these days with Mandy, he could have whatever he wanted, the latest game console, the most expensive toys. Go wherever he wanted to play, eat whatever he desired. No one would nag or control him. Julian had long been so happy that he forgot himself. Although he was young, he knew that everything in the family actually belonged to his father. If he left with Lillian, he would never be able to live such a life again. He might even have to live in a cramped, dilapidated house, go to a school for the poor, and be looked down upon by classmates who used to have to curry favor with him. This kind of life Julian didn't even want to think about it, therefore, no matter what, he had to stay at Kyle's home. Lillian, her eyes dimmed. Julian had been raised by her since he was a child, yet now he wouldn't even listen to a single word from her. Harvey frowned. If you have something to say, talk to me, don't involve the child. After speaking, Lillian, without waiting for her reaction, he pulled her into the bedroom. Lillian was still thinking about Julian and allowed him to drag her into the room before suddenly snapping back to reality, forcefully shaking off the man's hand. That hand had held Mandy's countless times, but now its touch only made her feel disgusted. Harvey was taken aback for a moment. The previous Lillian had always been calm and reserved. Throughout their entire marriage, they had never argued or fallen out. This was the first time she had shown resistance to his touch. Somehow, Harvey felt a bit irritated, but then his gaze fell upon the suitcase Lillian had packed and the marriage certificate on top of it. An understanding dawned on him. So, was she thinking of using a different tactic to get his attention because of recent events? Unfortunately, these were of no use to him, because only someone who loves you can tolerate your affectations and little schemes, and he had never felt that way about her. Still playing these little games even as they're about to divorce. How pretentious. Julian's attitude is clear for you to see. What's done is done. It's better to handle this with dignity rather than dragging it out and leaving shadows over our child's childhood. I'm the one at fault here, and I'll do my best to compensate you in the property division, if you have any other requests. Harvey's words were cut short by Lillian's sharp slap. Harvey stared in astonishment at the woman before him, his eyes turning red. In all his life, Harvey had never been slapped, not even by his elders. Harvey gritted his teeth. He wasn't in the habit of hitting women, but his patience had its limits. Lillian, acting like a shrew like this will only make me. Slap. Another heavy blow landed on Harvey's face. Lillian gazed coldly at him. At this moment, Harvey only filled her with utter disgust. He was the one who had betrayed their marriage and broken his promises. Yet he had the audacity to demand things from her with such a condescending attitude. Why should he? These 2 slaps were what he owed her. Harvey struggled to contain his anger. Do you think just because you took care of me for a few years, I should be grateful and support you for the rest of my life? Now it seems you were merely doing the work of a caregiver or a nanny, yet I've wasted a full 5 years on you, letting you enjoy the prestige of being Mrs. Shun for 5 years. I've already treated you fairly. Don't push my limits. Lillian could only find it laughable, the prestige of being Mrs. Shun. He thought she had been living a life of luxury as a noble lady, but he had no idea how much effort she had poured into nursing his once severely traumatized body back to a state no different from that of a normal person. She suddenly wanted to see whether Harvey's so-called love with Mandy could ease the pain when all his illnesses flared up. Lillian bent down to pick up the box on the floor, turned around and left without the slightest hesitation. Harvey stared in astonishment as Lillian walked away. He had expected Lillian to be in pain, to break down, to accuse him of betraying her years of sincere devotion. He never imagined she would leave so effortlessly. Harvey, for some reason, felt inexplicably irritated. He roughly loosened his tie and contacted Kyle's family's legal team, instructing them to draft a divorce agreement. In the agreement, Lillian didn't get a single cent of the marital property. He wanted to see how tough Lillian could be once she was left penniless. Lillian carried a pile of things back to the small apartment she had bought earlier. It couldn't compare to Kyle's mansion, but it was a place she had bought with her own savings, completely her own. As soon as she put down the things in her hands, her lawyer called and informed her of Harvey's demands one by one. When she learned that she was to be left with nothing and that Julian would not support her in the future, Lillian smiled sarcastically. 9 years of marriage, and all I got was leaving with nothing and being cut off from my son. I have no problem with that, but in return, I demand that Harvey gets none of my assets, and I won't provide him with any assistance. Is that acceptable? The lawyer was stunned and asked Harvey for his opinion. The man almost laughed in disbelief. What did she even have that made her think so highly of herself? Harvey agreed immediately. After receiving the affirmative answer, Lillian did not hesitate at all and agreed to sign the papers tomorrow. The entire negotiation process went unusually smoothly, so much so that even the lawyer found it unbelievable. He had expected a lot of haggling given the harsh divorce terms, but there was none. However, the lawyer glanced at Harvey's expression. Even though the other party was so cooperative, he didn't seem particularly happy about it. After finalizing the divorce matters, Lillian went to buy a few foreign language books, planning to relearn the language she had previously set aside to prepare for various situations when going abroad in the future. In the evening, Lillian was walking back from the library with her books when she saw brilliant fireworks blooming in large clusters overhead. A large number of drones formed a matrix, changing formations and finally spelling out the words "Harvey loves Mandy," followed by Mandy's profile and a giant heart. Many citizens looked up at the grand spectacle, unable to resist exclaiming and taking photos to commemorate the moment. Such a fireworks show combined with a drone performance cost almost an ordinary person's lifetime salary, a truly extravagant romance. Lillian tilted her head back, gazing at the dazzlingly bright fireworks. When she suddenly remembered Harvey once telling her that he was a straightforward guy who didn't know how to be romantic, so she'd better not expect any surprises for anniversaries. Now it seems, he wasn't incapable of romance, he just wasn't willing to put in any effort for her. Lillian silently watched the fireworks slowly fade away, just like her once fiery passion for Harvey, gradually burning out. She quietly wiped the corner of her eye, which had unknowingly become moist. Then turned and walked away. After the fireworks display, Harvey proposed to Mandy. As he was about to slip the ring onto her finger, he suddenly remembered the ring Lillian used to wear, the one he had given her as a free gift when he bought a tie. He had casually handed it to her, yet she had treasured it, wearing it constantly and never taking it off. Harvey snapped back to reality, but the joy he had felt earlier had suddenly vanished. Mandy was unaware, simply immersed in the joy of soon becoming Mrs. Shun, basking in everyone's flattery. Harvey, however, was somewhat irritable. Sitting by the window, he drank a few glasses of wine, and by the end of the engagement party, he was already slightly drunk. Mandy helped him into the car and settled him at home, but then heard Harvey suddenly slur drunkenly, "Lillian, where's my hangover soup?" Mandy felt as if struck by lightning. She wanted to turn and leave immediately, but she forced herself to hold back. Mandy's family had fallen on hard times, and she was no longer the little princess who was the center of attention. Harvey was the best option she could reach, so she couldn't afford to be willful anymore. Thinking this, Mandy turned and went into the kitchen. It was just a hangover soup. After all, Lillian as a housewife could do it, so there was no reason she couldn't. Following an online tutorial, she made a bowl of hangover soup. After tasting it and finding the flavor good, Mandy gently woke Harvey up. "Yang, have some hangover soup before you sleep, or you'll have a headache tomorrow." Harvey opened his eyes and saw Mandy taking care of him. For a moment, he felt unaccustomed to it, but then he remembered that he had proposed to her today. 9 years. Even if he hadn't invested much emotion in this marriage, he had ultimately grown accustomed to Lillian's presence. Mandy lowered her head and scooped a spoonful of soup, bringing it to Harvey's lips. The man took a sip but couldn't help frowning. The flavor was completely not to his taste, but thinking that Mandy had made it herself, he said nothing and forced down a few mouthfuls before going to sleep. The next day, Harvey woke up with a hangover headache. Rubbing his throbbing temples, he instinctively wanted to call Lillian over to give him a massage, but forcibly restrained himself. His expression somewhat awkward. They had already filed for divorce, and today they signed the agreement, becoming complete strangers. Mandy, lying beside him, saw his expression clearly and slowly clenched her fingers. She thought that driving Lillian away from Harvey was a success, but she overlooked the power of habit. Over time, would Harvey and Julian start to miss their previous life? Lillian, as agreed the day before, drove to the old house of Kyle's family to sign the divorce agreement with Harvey. Upon arrival, Harvey's lawyer was already waiting and explained the terms once more to Lillian. Without any hesitation, she signed her name on the last page. Harvey came out just in time to see Lillian signing the document. Her pen moved without the slightest pause, smooth and decisive. Harvey suddenly found the sight irritating for some reason. With a cold expression, he approached and was about to sign when he spoke up. "Once I sign this, there's no turning back for you. Are you sure you have nothing else to say?" Perhaps unintentionally recalling the many things Lillian had done, Harvey decided that if Lillian apologized for yesterday's unreasonable tantrum, he might consider being more flexible in the property division. Beside them, Mandy's heart tightened. She had been guarding against Lillian changing her mind. Never expecting that it would be Harvey who now hesitated to sign, Mandy lowered her gaze. She had to nip all variables in the bud. Seizing the moment when no one was paying attention to her, she turned and left. Lillian didn't even want to speak to Harvey. "We've already spoken so plainly yesterday, so don't hypocritically play the good guy now. Please sign quickly, I'm in a hurry." Harvey was left speechless. He had never known that Lillian had such a sharp-tongued side to her. But considering that Lillian was leaving with nothing, and as a housewife with little ability to support herself, she could only be tough for a moment, so he didn't bother to argue just to win the argument. After signing the divorce agreement, Lillian went back to pack up the belongings she hadn't taken with her yesterday and then left. Once in the car, she saw Mandy smiling at her from a distance in the rearview mirror. The triumphant, smug expression on her face filled Lillian with disgust. She stepped on the gas and quickly drove away from this place that held so many memories. Lillian was driving while thinking about what to do next when suddenly, she heard the piercing sound of a police siren. Lillian frowned and realized that the police car was right behind her. She slowed down to let it pass. But the police car suddenly sped up and forced her to pull over. Lillian, although confused, she complied and stopped the car. As she opened the door and was about to ask what was happening, she was abruptly pressed against the vehicle without explanation. Lillian's face was pressed against the cold car door, causing a sharp pain. A faint metallic taste of blood spread in her mouth. Clearly, she had cut herself during the impact. Lillian struggled a couple of times, but she simply couldn't break free from the grip of a well-trained adult man. After the police forcibly opened Lillian's trunk, their faces lit up with joy. The child has been found. The officer picked up the walkie-talkie, reported the situation, and then lifted the still unconscious Julian out from inside. The moment she saw Julian, Lillian's mind went blank with a buzzing sound. Julian, how could he be in her trunk? What on earth had happened? The area was congested due to parked cars, and many people gathered to see what was happening. When they saw that an unconscious child had been found in the trunk, their gazes toward Lillian instantly turned hostile. This woman looks decent on the outside. How could she do such a thing? Is she a human trafficker? Human traffickers deserve the death penalty. The onlookers were chattering with fervent excitement, and some radicals even took the opportunity as Lillian passed by, kicking her fiercely twice. Lillian winced in pain but forced herself to endure it. Her gaze couldn't help but drift toward the still unconscious Julian beside her, although his past actions had broken her heart. He was still her own flesh and blood, born after 10 months of pregnancy. At this moment, she cared about nothing else. She only wanted to know if Julian was all right. However, the police did not give Lillian a chance to reach Julian. After handcuffing her, they escorted her to another police car and took her away for interrogation. Lillian was taken to the police station and left alone in a dark interrogation room. Her mind was in turmoil. On one hand, she worried about Julian's safety. On the other, she couldn't comprehend how the situation would unfold. Just as her thoughts were in disarray, the interrogation room door creaked open, and the police escorted Lillian out. Lillian thought she would be interrogated, but instead she saw the expressionless Harvey. Lillian didn't care about anything else and anxiously asked, "Julian, is he conscious now? How is his condition?" Harvey gave her a cold glance. "Lillian, I had no idea your acting skills were this impressive. It was clearly you who forced a large amount of sleeping pills down Julian's throat, stuffed him into the trunk, and secretly took him away. What are you pretending for here?" Lillian widened her eyes. She heard Harvey's words clearly, but her brain couldn't process their meaning, finding them utterly absurd. "What did you say? Why are you still pretending to be innocent? If it wasn't you who forced him unconscious and took him away, then who else could it be?" "Lillian, if you want something, just say it directly. Resorting to kidnapping a child to achieve your goals is absolutely disgusting." Lillian shook her head, refusing to believe what she was hearing. "Impossible. Let Julian come and tell me himself. I don't believe he would say such a thing to you." Harvey stood up, looking down at Lillian from above. "You won't admit it until you're faced with the grim reality. Fine, I'll make you hear it clearly." After saying that, he immediately called the hospital. As soon as the call connected, they heard Julian's heart-wrenching sobs from the other end. "She's trying to take me away by force. I don't want to go with her. I'm scared." The gut-wrenching cries struck Lillian like a thunderbolt. She forced herself to stay calm. "Julian, I'm your mother. How could I ever do something like that to hurt you? Please calm down and think about what really happened. Tell everyone the truth." "Okay, you're not my mother. I don't have a mother like you. I don't want to go with you. Get away from me." Julian was still crying bitterly, but between the lines, there was nothing but resistance and disgust toward Lillian. Therefore, even though no one explicitly stated who had done such a heinous thing, everyone's gaze toward Lillian turned unfriendly. Lillian, her legs gave way and she collapsed to the ground, the echo of Julian's cries still ringing in her ears. Did he really despise his own birth mother so much that he wouldn't even speak a single word of fairness for her? Everyone's contemptuous gaze felt like a heavy slap, striking her face with brutal force. In Julian's heart, she might no longer be his mother. She was his shame, his burden. Lillian's body trembled uncontrollably when suddenly, she remembered Mandy's meaningful smile just before she left Kyle's house. At the time, she only thought it was Mandy showing off that she had won Harvey's heart, but now looking back, it just feels very strange. Julian, could it be that he was placed in Mandy's trunk at that time? If you calculate it, the timing fits perfectly. Lillian didn't hesitate to speak up. "Before I left Kyle's house, I saw Mandy near my car. I demand to see the surveillance footage from that time. I need to verify it." Harvey's expression turned completely cold because of these words. This woman, already caught red-handed, remained unrepentant and still wanted to frame Mandy. She was truly beyond redemption. "No need, I'll testify myself. This woman is our nanny." Taking advantage of having cared for Julian for a few years, she attempted to seduce me to climb the social ladder. Mandy is my fiancé. She was just spouting nonsense in a desperate attempt. Lillian's face instantly turned ashen as she stared at Harvey in disbelief, seemingly unable to believe he would distort the truth to such an extent. Perhaps the despair in her eyes was too profound. Harvey paused. Considering she has taken care of Julian for so many years, we won't press kidnapping charges. Detaining her for a few days as a lesson will suffice. After saying this, Harvey left, giving Lillian no further opportunity to defend herself. Lillian frantically explained that she truly was Julian's mother, but because Harvey and Julian both denied her existence, no one believed her. In the end, Lillian was sentenced to 3 days of detention. Though the time was short, it seemed to completely shatter Lillian as a person. For those 3 days, she hid in the corner of the detention center, neither eating nor drinking, and refusing to communicate with anyone. By the time Lillian was finally released, she had lost a noticeable amount of weight, with heavy dark circles under her eyes, looking as if a gust of wind could knock her over. Like a walking corpse, she wanted to leave this nightmare-like place, but the blinding flashes of camera lights and the aggressive questioning made Lillian unable to move an inch. "Miss, we heard you're the nanny for the Kyle family and tried to kidnap the Kyle family's young master to force Harvey to marry you. Is that true? Was it because Harvey's century proposal to Mandy triggered you, making you choose this path? May I ask how you, a mere nanny, thought you could marry Harvey and become a wealthy lady? What gave you such an illusion?" A barrage of extremely sarcastic questions, mixed with foul language from onlookers, came crashing down on Lillian. Her body trembled uncontrollably as she desperately covered her ears and pushed through the crowd. She ran to the car, pulled out the previous divorce agreement, and declared, "Harvey and I were originally husband and wife. Mandy is the one who destroyed someone else's marriage. It's clearly written here." However, no one listened to Lillian's words. In the chaos, the divorce agreement was snatched by someone, torn to pieces, and scattered all over the ground. She must have been dreaming so beautifully that she ended up fooling herself. Haha, who would be so blind as to not love a goddess like Mandy and instead marry such a malicious, haggard woman? Lillian was jostled, spat upon, and stumbled almost to the ground. Some even took advantage of the chaos to tear at her clothes. Yet no one cared. Instead, some loudly cheered, saying that a woman as vicious and despicable as her deserved to be stripped naked and publicly paraded through the streets. Countless waves of malice surged toward her, almost completely overwhelming Lillian. In the end, it was only when the police noticed the large crowd gathered and feared the risk of a stampede or other dangers that they dispersed the people. When the crowd dispersed, Lillian had most of her clothes torn open. She desperately clutched the fabric at her chest, barely managing to protect her last shred of dignity. Lillian staggered to her feet, wiped her dirty face, and sat in the car, staring vacantly ahead. She had no idea how long she remained like that before being jolted back to reality by the frantic vibration of her phone. Opening her phone, she saw her inbox flooded with messages from different numbers, all without exception cursing her for being shameless and overestimating herself by trying to climb the social ladder. Some even went so far as to Photoshop grotesque bloodstains from horror movies onto the humiliating photos taken of her surrounded by the crowd, covering her face with insulting words. Perhaps, having received too much stimulation, Lillian felt somewhat numb. Amid such intense cyberbullying, the only thought in her mind was to fight back. She had to make Harvey and his crew pay the price. She was about to go abroad and didn't have much time to deal with Harvey. Then her only way to break the deadlock, Lillian drove home, organized all the useful documents she had on hand, created a clear timeline of the evidence chain, and then contacted the department responsible for arranging this secret departure. "Hello, after I leave, could you help publish this content on the official account?" "Yes, just make sure it's posted and not deleted." Lillian had been with Harvey for so many years and knew his methods well. Therefore, she directly chose to have the authorities help publish this document as the safest option. After verifying the authenticity of the evidence provided by Lillian, the other party gave an affirmative reply. "You are a peacekeeping hero. It is our duty to protect your reputation." After receiving an affirmative reply, Lillian let out a long sigh of relief. Early the next morning, Lillian boarded a flight abroad, heading to the most dangerous war zone. Before the plane took off, she glanced at the time, her gaze cold and sharp. She hoped Harvey would like this gift from her. Lillian left by plane at the same time as Harvey and Mandy were just returning from their vacation abroad. Julian quietly slept in Mandy's arms, and Harvey couldn't help but curl his lips into a smile as he saw this rather harmonious scene through the rearview mirror. However, thinking about the turmoil online, Harvey pressed his lips together. He had thought Lillian would apologize and yield because of this, but she hadn't contacted him at all during this time. Leaving Harvey with mixed feelings in his heart, just as he was lost in thought, suddenly, the ringing of his phone abruptly broke the silence. Harvey frowned, but when he saw it was his special assistant calling, he still answered. "Mr. Harvey, something terrible has happened. Ms. Lillian has released a statement online, publicly revealing your past marital relationship." Harvey slammed on the brakes upon hearing this. "What's going on? Didn't I tell you to monitor public opinion and prevent any information unfavorable to the Kyle family from being released? Can't you even handle such a small matter?" Harvey's words were cut off as a sudden flood of calls inundated his phone. He wanted to hang up the incoming call, but his phone was suddenly overwhelmed with a massive influx of calls and text messages, making it completely unresponsive. Harvey took one look and saw that they were all cursing him for cheating and accusing him of being inhuman for harming his ex-wife. Seeing those vicious words, Harvey was so angry he almost smashed his phone. The ominous feeling in his heart grew stronger. Could it be that Lillian's recent quietness was actually her gathering strength to strike a fatal blow? But, impossible, how could a housewife like her have the ability to find a way to suppress public opinion? Although he thought so, Harvey didn't dare to delay any longer. He took out another backup phone and checked Twitter. Harvey didn't even need to search, as he saw Lillian's name right on the first trending topic marked with a hot label. Harvey's heart immediately sank, clearly not expecting Lillian to have escalated the public opinion to such an extent. He clicked into the trending topic and saw a post from the local official account stating that the truth about the recent high-profile nanny kidnapping case had been clarified. The so-called nanny was actually the child's mother, who had not only been forcibly driven out of her home by her unfaithful husband but also falsely accused of kidnapping her own child and sent to the police station, suffering extensive cyberbullying. Below the blue background, white text official announcement were various notarized documents, including Lillian and Harvey's divorce certificate showing their marriage and divorce dates, as well as Lillian's birth certificate for Julian, completely proving she was the biological mother rather than some so-called opportunistic nanny. Lillian was already incredibly popular, but this sudden 180-degree turn of events completely exploded across the internet. Those who had been passionately cursing Lillian were left dumbfounded. Faced with this ironclad evidence in the announcement, they suddenly felt like they had been played for fools by Harvey and Mandy, and they quickly turned their guns toward Harvey. "You beast, Shun. How shameless can you be? Just for a mistress, you kicked out your wife of many years with nothing and threw her out on the streets. Are you even human? Oh my God, I thought children wouldn't lie, but that kid didn't even acknowledge her own mother. What an ungrateful little brat among brats. Damn. Mandy still acts like some white, rich, and beautiful goddess every day. I've never seen anyone so disgusting. She climbed her way up by being a mistress and flaunts it so high profile as if she wants the whole world to know. And what's with that proposal of the century? If this pair of scumbags were in ancient times, they'd be drowned in a pig cage. From today on, I'm boycotting all products under Kyle's family. I absolutely refuse to contribute even a brick or tile to such a morally bankrupt enterprise." As online public opinion heated up, Kyle's family's stock price began to fluctuate. In just a few dozen minutes, the drop was already shocking. If this continues, it might trigger panic selling, and Kyle's family could even suffer severe damage from this turmoil. Harvey watched this scene unfold, his hands trembling uncontrollably with rage, but he was powerless against the official accounts releasing the information. No matter how capable he was, he couldn't extend his influence to the official side. The only way is still to have Lillian step in to calm this storm. Harvey clenched his fists. This woman was ruthless enough to force him to bow to her using such methods, and yet at this moment he had no choice but to do so. Suppressing the unwillingness in his heart, Harvey dialed Lillian's number, but only got an unreachable tone from the other end. Harvey refused to give up and kept calling, but still no one answered. Before, Lillian had always set his number to special alert, so whenever she called him, he would answer instantly. Now he's really grown some nerve. It's completely unreachable. Harvey slammed his phone onto the ground with a bang, his face dark with fury. Originally sleeping beside Mandy, Julian was startled awake by the loud noise. Not knowing what had happened, he started crying loudly. But Harvey was in no mood to comfort Julian. With a grim expression, he got out of the car, ready to contact his media connections to try and suppress the matter. Julian looked at Mandy. Mandy was also staring at her phone with a pale face. Harvey had already suffered, and naturally Mandy wasn't faring much better. Not only did she receive many attacking text messages and phone calls, but her Twitter was also flooded with hundreds of thousands of abusive comments. Mandy was used to being the center of attention and had never been insulted like a rat scurrying across the street. Watching the comments continuously increase, With all kinds of foul language mercilessly condemning her shameless behavior, she was on the verge of a mental breakdown. In her ears was Julian's piercing cries. Her face flushed bright red as if all the blood in her body had rushed to her head. "Stop crying, it's so annoying." Mandy had no patience to comfort a child. Her loud scolding startled Julian into stopping his cries. He stared blankly at Mandy. Why was Mandy, who used to be so gentle and would coax him no matter what, now acting like this? If it were Mom, she would carefully ask if he was uncomfortable somewhere when she saw him crying, and wouldn't rest until she made sure he was okay. Julian vaguely sensed that something seemed different, but didn't dare think too much about it. Instead, he quieted down. Though tears kept falling uncontrollably, Harvey returned to see this scene. Mandy was texting with an impatient expression, while Julian huddled far away from her, his little face flushed red. Not daring to make a sound, this sight made Harvey frown involuntarily. Previously, Mandy had always appeared very fond of children in front of him and had taken good care of Julian, but this scene made him doubt whether what he had seen before was real, but that doubt was quickly suppressed by Harvey. He subconsciously refused to admit he had misjudged someone. He took a deep breath. "Don't worry too much about this matter. I'll find a way to resolve it as soon as possible. You should take Julian back to rest first." Mandy snapped back to reality and saw Harvey returning, then quickly suppressed the irritation and hostility on her face. "Yes, I know, Julian. Let's go back together. We shouldn't cause any more trouble for your father." Julian subconsciously didn't want to go back with Mandy, but seeing Harvey's unpleasant expression, he didn't dare say anything and obediently went home first. Harvey went straight to the company to discuss with the PR and marketing departments on how to salvage this public opinion crisis. They couldn't delete the official statement that had been released, and Lillian was completely unreachable. They could only try to divert public attention to avoid causing greater impact on Kyle's family. At this moment, Harvey's people discovered that Lillian had once received a property gift from old Master Shan, and immediately reported it. Harvey looked at the list of those properties and finally understood where Lillian's confidence had come from before. No wonder she had chosen to stand up against him. Harvey immediately thought of a countermeasure. He released some records of his previous campus romance with Mandy, and explained that his marriage to Lillian was unilaterally arranged by his family while Harvey was unconscious. But the two had no feelings for each other, which led to their later decision to divorce through negotiation, and Lillian agreed to leave with property compensation, unexpectedly. Lillian suddenly went back on her word and even attempted to forcibly take the child to threaten him for more money. It was to teach Lillian a lesson that he led to all the subsequent events. Harvey publicly disclosed the list of properties under Lillian's name. The enormous amount was enough to stir up many people's resentment towards the wealthy, at least preventing public opinion from completely siding against him. Shortly after the blog post was published, it achieved the expected effect. Many people, seeing such a large amount of wealth, grew envious and instead began condemning Lillian as an insatiable gold digger who deserved the lesson she got. Harvey had dealt with the public opinion crisis until late at night. Seeing that netizens had been successfully misled, the man finally breathed a sigh of relief. To avoid any further mishaps, Harvey ended up sleeping at the company. In the middle of the night, Harvey was abruptly awakened by waves of stomach pain. Only then did he remember that since returning from abroad, he had been so busy dealing with all these messy matters that he had only drunk a few sips of water and hadn't eaten anything for over 10 hours. In the past, Lillian would occasionally send him messages, reminding him not to forget to eat. Although he always found it annoying, he had never experienced hunger-induced stomach pain like this before. Harvey was lost in thought for a moment. Then, realizing that he was actually thinking about Lillian, he suddenly sat up and roughly ran his hands through his hair, messing it up. Was he crazy? After Lillian had caused him so much trouble, how could he still recall her good qualities? Harvey frustratedly opened his phone, intending to check if Mandy had sent anything, but ended up inexplicably scrolling through the PR statement he had posted earlier. But unexpectedly, many of the earlier comments condemning Lillian's greed had disappeared, replaced once again by a flood of comments criticizing him. Damn it, Harvey was nearly driven mad. Just hours ago, everything had been moving in the direction he wanted. How could the public opinion shift again after just one night's sleep? Harvey patiently clicked into the repost section and discovered that the official account, which had previously posted a clarification for Lillian, had reposted his blog, along with an additional announcement and other evidence. This time, it was the record of when the late Mr. Shan gifted the property to Lillian, as well as the details of Lillian using these assets to establish a charitable foundation specifically to fund medical treatment for sick children who couldn't afford it due to their family circumstances. Moreover, the donation was made long before the incident gained traction, clearly not a last-minute effort to appease public opinion. All the evidence indicates that Lillian never cared about Harvey's money, and instead directly donated all the assets to do good deeds. Additionally, there was other evidence, including previous medical records of Lillian accompanying Harvey to hospital visits and rehabilitation sessions. Those documents were extremely detailed and complex, yet Lillian had kept them neatly and completely, which fully demonstrated how much care she had taken before. Such a thorough chain of evidence completely shattered Harvey's various lies. Moreover, because of the misleading blog post he had previously published, official sources publicly criticized the Kyle family group for using improper means to spread rumors, slander, and manipulate public opinion, stating that such behavior would not be tolerated. Only then did Harvey realize the severity of the situation. If before he had held onto a glimmer of hope, thinking he could muddy the waters and protect his reputation, now he was practically nailed to the pillar of shame. Even officially labeled as a malicious incident, his hands kept trembling uncontrollably. He hardly dared to imagine just how severe the situation would become. If he couldn't handle this crisis properly, the Kyle family would likely be ruined in his hands. He immediately contacted everyone he could reach, trying to pull strings, but no one dared to get involved and risk misfortune. As the news spread, many companies that had been collaborating with Kyle's family began to terminate their partnerships one after another, hoping to avoid being affected. Harvey was overwhelmed and tried to make amends, but with little success. His stomach, which had only been aching before, now felt as if it were being cut by a knife, yet he had no choice but to endure it. However, when work hours began, Harvey was met with several resignation letters. The employees, seeing how ruthlessly Harvey had treated his wife, who had stood by him through his coma, felt a sense of impending doom. Fearing that years of dedication to the company might end with them being cast aside, they began preparing to resign and seek new opportunities elsewhere. Harvey never expected that under such difficult circumstances, these carefully cultivated leaders would choose to leave one after another. His face turned deathly pale as he clutched his aching stomach. "If you don't want to work anymore, then get out, all of you." No sooner had he spoken than he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, his body swayed, and he collapsed to the ground, losing consciousness. Fearing that Harvey might actually be in serious danger, the group quickly called an ambulance and contacted Mandy. Mandy hurried to the scene and saw Harvey lying weakly on the hospital bed, his face as pale as paper. The Harvey she had always seen was full of vigor and confidence. So she never imagined that this seemingly invincible man could be so powerless, unable to even handle the public opinion storm stirred up by Lillian. Mandy was so harshly criticized that she had to hide whenever she went out, which inevitably made her resentful. However, she also knew that if Harvey fell from grace, with her already tarnished reputation, her life would only get worse. So, she quickly busied herself with handling procedures and getting checkups. After settling Harvey, Mandy immediately went back and personally cooked a pot of stomach-nourishing porridge, bringing it over along with Julian. By the time Mandy returned, Harvey had fully woken up and was already on the phone discussing contract termination matters with business partners. Upon seeing Mandy, whether due to physical discomfort or not, his previously intense emotions seemed to have faded somewhat, and he merely nodded. Mandy's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Harvey was starting to feel it wasn't worth being with her because of these matters? Mandy suppressed the fear in her heart, held Julian's hand, and spoke gently. "Yang, I made some porridge for you, and Julian said he was worried about his dad, so I brought him to see you." Seeing Julian, Harvey's expression softened a bit, and he responded with a soft Mandy quickly opened the porridge, scooped a spoonful, blew on it to cool it down, and brought it to the man's lips. Harvey had been hungry for a long time, so he cooperatively drank it. However, the moment it went down, his expression stiffened. The porridge couldn't be called unpalatable, but it was nothing like the comforting warmth of Lillian's previous preparation, which had soothed his stomach discomfort instantly. But after all, it was Mandy's heartfelt effort. Harvey forced himself to drink most of it, yet, not long after, he vomited everything back up. This time, it was even more severe than before. After emptying everything he had eaten, he vomited a significant amount of blood, staining the snow-white bedsheets with a large, terrifying red patch. Julian was so frightened that he burst into tears. "Daddy, please don't die. I'll call Mom right away. She'll definitely know what to do." Mandy's face suddenly changed. What would it mean to call Lillian over at a time like this? Wouldn't it just make Harvey remember how good she was? But Harvey, who was extremely weak at the moment, silently allowed it. Not only was his stomach churning with unbearable pain, but he was also overwhelmed by company matters. If he could meet with Lillian and clarify things, it would be for the best. Julian's call went unanswered for a long time before someone finally picked up. With a tearful voice, he said, "Mom, Dad's stomach illness has flared up again, and it's really, really bad. He's in the hospital now and can't eat anything. Could you bring over some of the porridge you used to make for him before? But the response came in a cold male voice. Sorry, Julian little friend, your mother can't take your call right now. However, she previously appointed me as her lawyer to transfer a monthly amount from the foundation to your account. You'll be free to use it as you wish once you come of age, as your child's support. As for other matters, I'm afraid I can't be of help. Julian hadn't expected such a reply. Tears hung on his face, threatening to fall but not quite dropping. While Harvey's expression turned completely dark, he didn't believe for a second that this man was a lawyer, probably just Lillian's lover. Right, no wonder she had been so carefree during the divorce. She must have already had a man on the side. This also explained how Lillian, who used to only stay at home cooking and doing chores, had the connections to reach out to the authorities. Probably, this man's identity wasn't simple either. At the thought of this possibility, Harvey's face grew even darker, and he blurted out without thinking, "Do you think I would believe your nonsense? Lillian must be right beside you, right, sir? I truly admire your taste, actually liking to meddle in other people's families and taking on someone else's discarded second-hand goods." The lawyer frowned upon hearing this. "Sir, please do not make baseless accusations. My client genuinely cannot meet with you at the moment. If you continue to spread rumors and cause trouble, I can take legal action against you. That is, if you aren't afraid of making the Kyle family's reputation even more notorious." After saying this, the call was promptly hung up. Hearing the beeping sound from the receiver, Harvey slammed his fist violently onto the bed, producing a loud thud. Julian was so frightened that he held back his tears and didn't dare speak again. Harvey looked grim. Lillian's possible betrayal made him completely unable to control his inner rage. He wanted to directly have someone ruin Lillian and her lover, to make her understand the cost of angering him, but he felt restrained. He didn't know the man's identity and couldn't risk causing more trouble for the already unstable Kyle family. In the following days, Harvey didn't dare act recklessly. He could only bribe the media to expose some celebrity scandals. Finally managing to free himself and Mandy from the center of the storm, however, Kyle's family still suffered significant losses due to this turmoil, with many partners terminating contracts and numerous senior employees who had followed Harvey for years also jumping ship. Therefore, Harvey, though ill, couldn't rest properly at all and had to personally handle company affairs. The exhaustion from work combined with his stomach condition flaring up made him suffer tremendously. Harvey dared not eat anything Mandy sent anymore, specifically hiring a chef specializing in stomach-nourishing meals to develop suitable dietary remedies for him. But this only provided slight improvement. He still couldn't eat much. Within just a few days, Harvey rapidly lost weight. Combined with being tormented by pain and unable to sleep well every day, he exuded an overall air of decadence. Mandy initially stayed by his side constantly, but she couldn't endure it for long and found it hard to tolerate Harvey's irritable temper caused by his illness. Moreover, having already gained a notorious reputation back home, she felt like a rat scurrying across the street, hounded and despised wherever she went. Using the excuse of taking Julian out to relax and clear his mind, she went abroad directly. Harvey was fully aware of Mandy's true intentions. Outwardly, he calmly agreed, but inwardly, he felt deeply unsettled. Back when he was in a coma after the car accident and became vegetative, Mandy didn't return to take care of him, and he didn't blame her for it. But now, her recent actions only proved that her so-called reason for not being able to return to the country due to academic commitments back then was nothing but an excuse. The truth was crystal clear. Mandy was only willing to share in his wealth and prosperity but had no intention of standing by him through hardship. His resolute choice back then ultimately became a joke that harmed both others and himself. Harvey then remembered that when he had just woken up for rehabilitation, walking seemed like a distant goal. His temper was even worse than it is now, yet Lillian always patiently stayed by his side. No matter how he raged or threw things, she never left. She even endured being accidentally hurt by him a few times, insisting on completing the rehabilitation process with him before tending to her wounds. Harvey tried hard to restrain himself from thinking about Lillian, because all the pain he was suffering now was clearly brought by Lillian. But humans are strange creatures. The more they try to control themselves from thinking about something, the more they can't help but think about it. Harvey recalled the period when he had just regained consciousness and his bodily functions hadn't yet recovered, Lillian supporting him through difficult rehabilitation, cheering with delight at even the slightest progress he made. Smiling like a child, he thought of how she studied daily how to nourish his body, how to massage his muscles, apply acupuncture to his pressure points, and even ended up in the hospital herself from testing the effects of medicine meant for him. He thought of the occasional times he impulsively gave her little gifts, nothing particularly valuable, yet she was always so surprised and delighted, her eyes sparkling as brilliantly as stars in the night sky. Harvey then realized that he wasn't actually indifferent to Lillian, all her actions and qualities, though he hadn't consciously committed them to memory before, had already seeped into his very bones and blood through their day and night companionship, becoming an inseparable part of him. Thinking this way, Harvey suddenly had a strong urge to see Lillian. Harvey could no longer resist wanting to know Lillian's situation. So, patiently and carefully, he wrote a message, "Have you been doing well lately? About what happened before. I acted impulsively and ended up hurting you. If possible, could we meet? I have a lot I want to say to you. Perhaps we could clear up the misunderstandings from before." After sending the message, Harvey sat on the hospital bed, checking his phone from time to time, as if afraid of missing something. But, as time ticked by, that chat window remained quiet, showing no signs of any reply. Harvey felt an indescribable restlessness. Whenever he had contacted Lillian before, she would always reply immediately. Even if she occasionally missed a message, she would explain why. In contrast, he was often the one who didn't respond to her messages. Now, with the roles reversed and him waiting for a reply, Harvey finally realized how agonizing it was to wait for someone else's message. After checking his phone countless times without getting any response, Harvey self-deceptively hid the chat window, forcing himself to focus on work matters. However, compared to his previous wholehearted dedication, this time he always seemed a bit distracted. Finally, upon hearing the notification sound from his phone, Harvey immediately tossed aside the documents in his hand and opened his phone. Yet, it wasn't a notification of Lillian replying to his message at all, but rather an alert that Mandy had exceeded the limit while using his card abroad. In the past, Harvey wouldn't have cared about such a trivial matter, but now, thinking that he was still lying in the hospital while Mandy was abroad splurging extravagantly, he couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. Think again about the jewelry and luxury cars he gave away without batting an eye after Mandy returned, and the harsh divorce agreement he forced on Lillian, making her leave with nothing. Harvey felt a wave of bitterness in his chest. If she were Lillian, how could she possibly let it go so easily? Harvey took a deep breath, gave up on wishful thinking, and wrote another message. "Julian misses you too, if possible. It would be good to see him as well." Harvey thought for a long time but couldn't recall a single instance where he had been good to Lillian. Between them, it seemed like it was always Lillian trying to warm his heart, while the warmth he gave in return was pitifully little. Therefore, Harvey could only contact her in Julian's name. After all, he was the child she had carried for 10 months and raised from infancy. There was an unbreakable blood bond between them. Lillian, having donated her assets yet still thinking of Julian's child support, clearly still held Julian in her heart. Harvey suddenly felt relieved that they still had Julian between them. Otherwise, the last thread connecting him and Lillian might have been completely severed. However, Harvey's confidently sent message still sank like a stone in the ocean. Lillian showed no response, as if she had completely stopped caring. Harvey felt somewhat lost, an emotion that rarely appeared in him. He never imagined Lillian would actually abandon him, to the extent that even mentioning Julian couldn't sway her heart. It seemed she had truly detached herself from the past, no longer caring about them. A wave of panic and helplessness washed over him. Harvey suddenly couldn't bear to stay in the hospital waiting idly any longer. He immediately wanted to contact Lillian's relatives and friends, but in an instant, he was left with only confusion. He had never paid attention to Lillian's social interactions, only knowing that her parents passed away early. She was raised by adoptive parents, and after marrying him, she had always managed household affairs at the Kyle family's home. That's why he was so certain she wouldn't dare leave the Kyle family, at least not with such defiance. Little did he expect that reality would slap him hard in the face. Harvey had no choice but to hire a private investigator to track down Lillian's whereabouts. No matter the cost, he was determined to find Lillian. The private investigator soon found some people connected to Lillian, and Harvey contacted them one by one. Because his previous affair and the incident of forcing Lillian to leave had caused too much of a stir, when he contacted these people, he mostly received cold shoulders, usually getting cursed at a few times before the call was hung up. Harvey had no choice but to say that Julian was sick and really wanted to see his biological mother, which finally persuaded them. However, the answers he received were all the same. They didn't know where Lillian was and hadn't been in contact with her recently. The private detective also said that since that day when the information was released, Lillian seemed to have completely vanished within the country, leaving no trace behind. Harvey only then began to panic a little. He never expected that he wouldn't be able to reach Lillian, and that she would remain indifferent even when Julian was sick. Keep investigating. Check if she has gone abroad. Harvey refused to give up. At the same time, He planned to go back and search through Lillian's belongings to see if she had left any clues, but as soon as he returned home, he saw Julian in the living room, gripping a game controller, eyes fixed intently on the TV screen, completely unaware that he had returned. Julian was surrounded by snack and takeout packaging boxes, clearly having been eating junk food all this time. His clothes looked somewhat dirty too, a far cry from his previous delicate and adorable appearance. Now resembling a little beggar on the street, Harvey had a gloomy expression. Previously, Mandy had said she would take Julian abroad to relax, so why was he alone at home playing games and eating takeout? Harvey snatched the controller from Julian. Just as Julian was about to lose his temper, he saw that it was Harvey who had returned and immediately quieted down. Not daring to speak, "Why are you alone? Where is she? Why didn't she take you out to relax?" Julian looked puzzled. "Are you talking about Mandy? She said she was going abroad, left me some money, and told me to behave at home. She promised to bring me gifts when she returns." Harvey clenched his teeth, veins bulging on his forehead. Mandy had only paid lip service, actually leaving Julian alone at home without any care. Fortunately, Julian was relatively obedient, just playing games at home and using food delivery apps to order meals. Otherwise, who knows what could have happened during this period without anyone looking after him. If Lillian were here, how could she have let Julian neglect himself to this extent? Thinking of this, Harvey seemed to recall something else. Previously, he had been convinced that it was Lillian who had drugged Julian and taken him away. But now, looking back, was that really the truth? That day, Lillian's frantic explanations still seemed to echo in his ears. She had told him to check the surveillance footage, to see for himself who had done such an inhuman thing to Julian. Harvey called the nanny and asked her to clean up Julian first. Then, he hurried off to check the surveillance footage from that time. Following the date, Harvey quickly found the folder containing the surveillance footage from that day. Strangely, however, the records from that day had all been inexplicably deleted. Harvey already had a rough guess in his mind, his clenched fists creaking. What else is unclear? Lillian never stayed at home, so she couldn't have deleted the surveillance records. Only Mandy would do such a thing to destroy evidence. Harvey suppressed the anger in his heart and directly called in the company's technical department to restore those surveillance records. Mandy didn't completely destroy the data, only deleted it, so recovery wasn't difficult. Before long, Harvey saw the deleted portion of the surveillance video footage. Watching the footage where Mandy sneakily carried the unconscious Julian and carefully placed him in the trunk of Lillian's car, Harvey finally couldn't control himself and punched the monitor in front of him. He had been so foolish, completely deceived by Mandy's pretended affection for the child. But then, he laughed at himself mockingly. He clearly knew that Mandy and Julian weren't related by blood. How could her treatment of him compare to that of Lillian, his biological mother? Yet he had deliberately turned a blind eye before. Now, he was also paying the price for his foolishness and cold-heartedness. Harvey's gaze turned cold and stern. He immediately called the bank to completely freeze the supplementary card he had previously given to Mandy. Then, he made a copy of the video and sent it to his lawyer. He intended to sue Mandy and make her pay for what she had done. Mandy, on the other hand, paid no attention to what was happening back home. Instead, she was thoroughly enjoying herself abroad, reluctant to leave. Previously, due to her family's financial decline, she had rarely been able to indulge in the pleasure of spending money lavishly. Now, with Harvey's card in hand, she was splurging extravagantly here, basking in the admiring gazes of foreigners. Finally, she felt liberated from the shadow of being universally scorned that had haunted her before. This one, and that bag, I want them all. Mandy selected a new luxury bag and swiped her card without hesitation. But a moment later, she was informed that the card had insufficient funds. Mandy was stunned. It was Harvey's supplementary card. How could it possibly be short on balance? The only possibility was that the card had been frozen by Harvey. As soon as Mandy thought of this, she didn't dare continue her extravagant spending, embarrassed. She said she didn't want the items anymore and left under the strange gazes of everyone around. When she reached a place where no one was paying attention, Mandy contacted Harvey. Harvey didn't get angry either, just asked her why she hadn't brought Julian along when going abroad. Mandy naturally felt guilty. Why would she bring the bastard child born to Lillian when she was out having fun? Besides, she had left enough money for Julian before leaving. What could possibly happen to him at Kyle's house? Though thinking this way, Mandy still explained pitifully. Julian said he didn't want to come out and play, that traveling was too exhausting. I thought it would be better for him to rest at home, so I didn't bring him. Is he unhappy at home again? With these words, she made herself appear utterly innocent, as if it was Julian who had been willful and unwilling to go out. No, he said he misses you, and as it happens, I have some gifts I want to give you. You've suffered a lot of grievances during this time. Come back, Harvey said calmly, but a chill could be seen in his eyes. Mandy didn't suspect anything, thinking that the previous failed card swipe was probably just a misunderstanding, and immediately agreed. After hanging up the phone, Harvey went downstairs. Julian, with the nanny's help, had already taken a bath and changed clothes. Seeing him, Julian immediately lowered his head. Afraid that Harvey would scold him, Harvey couldn't quite put his finger on what he was feeling. The previous Julian, though somewhat spoiled, was overall a confident and adorable child. Yet after being handed over to Mandy for just a few days, he had become like this. Harvey patted Julian's head. Julian, do you miss your mom? Julian hesitated for a moment, seemingly wondering why Harvey would ask such a question. This overly cautious demeanor pierced Harvey's heart. He hadn't realized that Julian had been trying so hard to please him as his father. Was that why he acted particularly close to Mandy? Was it just because he was afraid of being abandoned? Don't be afraid, I just want to know what you're thinking. Say whatever comes to your mind. Julian hesitated for a moment, then gave a slight nod. At first, he had indeed felt much more relaxed without his mother's constant nagging and supervision, but as time went on, he began to feel extremely uncomfortable, especially when he was around Mandy. Although he could do whatever he wanted, she never cared about whether he ate well or dressed warmly enough. She would even occasionally show an impatient look in her eyes, which made Julian dare not act recklessly. He always had to be careful with his words and actions, afraid of upsetting Mandy, worried that she would have Harvey kick him out. I kind of miss my mom, Julian said truthfully. And Harvey felt a pang of sadness. Harvey bent down and held Julian. It's okay, she'll be back after a while. These words seemed to be spoken for Julian, and also as if spoken to himself. Harvey stayed with Julian, and only after the child was coaxed to sleep did he finally have some free time. Before, he thought he was busy with work, and Lillian had nothing to do at home. So he felt justified in leaving all of Julian's matters for Lillian to handle. He thought it was easy, but when he actually started taking care of the child himself, he realized it wasn't easy at all. In the past, he had taken it for granted, assuming that Lillian should silently stay at home and sacrifice for everyone, never expecting anything in return. Just as he was thinking this, footsteps sounded outside the door. Mandy smiled and raised the exquisitely wrapped bag in her hand toward Harvey. Yang, I picked out a gift for you here. Would you like to see it? Harvey found it utterly ironic. She was using his own credit card to buy something, only to give it back to him as a gift. How could she even say that with a straight face? But Harvey's emotions remained unreadable, as he spoke lightly. How about we take a look at the gift I prepared for you first? Mandy didn't suspect anything and sat down beside Harvey, intimately linking her arm with his. Harvey immediately pulled away, opened the laptop on the table, and clicked on one of the videos. Mandy was initially a bit confused, but as she continued watching, her expression changed. Yang, what do you mean by this? What do I mean? Shouldn't you be clearer about it than I am? That day, you drugged Julian, then secretly placed him in Lillian's car, framing her for trying to kidnap the child. How come you've already forgotten in just a few days? Mandy never expected things to be exposed, her heart surging with overwhelming waves of shock and fear as she looked at Harvey. Yang, I didn't mean to. I was just afraid that Lillian would disturb us again through Julian, so I thought. I didn't want it to be like that. I just love you too much. That's why. Love me too much. Harvey suddenly laughed, as if hearing a huge joke. Your love is leaving me during my toughest times. Then coming back to pour out your grievances after I've recovered and built a successful career, and running off abroad at the slightest setback, enjoying everything I provide for you while refusing to share any burden with me. Mandy felt her pride wounded by his words and wanted to retort, but realized that Harvey seemed to be speaking nothing but the truth, outright. She no longer pretended to be that pitiful, vulnerable figure. Instead, she looked at Harvey and spoke sarcastically. Yeah. But isn't that exactly what you fall for? Lillian was willing to lower herself and endure hardship with you. But what did she get in return? Kicked out of the house without a single penny to her name. What gives someone like you the right to demand that a woman share your hardships? Are you even worthy? With a loud bang, Harvey slammed his fist on the table. Mandy stiffened in fear but refused to back down. Harvey could only feel utterly ridiculous. Even Mandy thought he didn't deserve Lillian's sacrifices. It seemed he truly wasn't worthy. You're right. I was blind to abandon my wife for a woman like you. Everything that happened before was my own fault. But now, we need to settle the score between us properly. Harvey had been suspicious of Mandy from the start, so he had someone thoroughly investigate her recent activities, and the results were shocking, as soon as the words were spoken. The piercing sound of police sirens could be heard outside. Several officers, having received a report, had come to arrest Mandy. Mandy was horrified, completely unable to believe that Harvey would go this far. Miss, You are suspected of slander, defamation, and administering drugs to a child, endangering his life. Please come with us. Yang, I was wrong, I didn't mean to, I really won't dare anymore, seeing the situation turning against her. Mandy lost her earlier toughness and looked pleadingly at Harvey, hoping he would be lenient and not send her to the police station. My lawyer will discuss the next steps with you. Harvey remained completely unmoved, watching as the police took her away. Mandy's shouts grew fainter. Harvey finally sat down, his hand caressing a family photo that had been placed in Julian's room earlier. Gazing at Lillian's serene face in the photo, Harvey murmured to himself, Lillian, the suffering you endured before, she will repay it 1,000-fold, so, please don't be angry anymore, alright, but a photo is just a photo after all. Offering Harvey no response whatsoever, Mandy was taken away. Under police investigation, it was discovered that she not only drugged Julian and framed Lillian, but also bribed an online troll company. Some time ago, the online bullying of Lillian was her doing. It was also her who deliberately leaked Lillian's privacy, exposing her phone number and address, causing constant disruptions to Lillian's normal life. It was precisely because of her instigation that public opinion grew increasingly frenzied, to the point where official intervention was required to calm the situation. Harvey was somewhat surprised after seeing this evidence. He had originally intended to teach Mandy a lesson, but now it seemed her actions were severe enough to land her in jail. However, all of this was nothing but the consequences of her own actions. Harvey left the lawsuit against Mandy to the lawyers to handle. Mandy will face fair legal punishment. Harvey explained the whole story to Julian. After learning what kind of person Mandy was, Julian realized how naive his previous thoughts had been, actually believing that someone with no emotional foundation or blood relation would treat him well. Dad, I think, I did a lot of things before that hurt Mom. Julian thought about how he had said many hurtful things to Lillian in order to please Mandy, and his face gradually turned pale. Before, he also thought that this family was solely supported by his father, and that his mother was only doing things anyone could do, which wasn't really important at all. But when she really left, when she stopped caring for him, Julian realized that the life he had taken for granted actually required Lillian's diligent efforts to maintain. I want to see Mom. I want to apologize to her, I miss her, but, will she ever forgive us? Probably because recently Harvey had been showing him a lot more care. Julian was no longer as timid as before. Looking at Julian's fearful expression, Harvey felt a pang of sadness and quickly comforted him. No, she wouldn't be so cruel. You're her child, how could she abandon you? These words were not only meant to comfort Julian, but also to console himself. During these days, Harvey had never given up searching for Lillian, but he had found nothing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. He thought that if Lillian knew Mandy had been dealt with and knew how much Julian missed her, she would surely soften her heart, right? Mandy was soon sentenced to 6 months in prison for charges including privacy violation, inciting cyber violence, and defamation. After the verdict was announced, it was quickly discovered and shared by netizens who thrive on drama, drawing significant attention. Truly, good and evil will eventually be repaid. This is the consequence of destroying someone else's family, ending up behind bars. I hope all those shameless homewreckers who knowingly get involved with taken men meet the same fate. Don't forget that despicable man. He's no good either. Mandy was mercilessly criticized by netizens. Harvey couldn't escape either, but this time he didn't get angry out of humiliation because of it. Nor did he try to defend himself anymore. Instead he calmly accepted it. He only hoped Lillian would see his current attitude of admitting mistakes, at the very least, give him one chance to meet. Just as Harvey was lost in these thoughts, his phone suddenly rang. Taking a look, it was actually Lillian's number. The man immediately straightened up and eagerly answered the call. Lillian, are you finally willing to see me and Julian? Harvey froze for a moment, his hands trembling involuntarily. But the voice that came through wasn't Lillian's familiar tone. Instead, it was a cold, almost mechanical baritone. Harvey, I have a letter left by Lillian to deliver to you and Julian. You'll learn about her situation from it. Harvey parted his lips a few times, wanting to question what relationship this man had with Lillian, but he knew he had no right to say such things. He could only suppress the anger in his heart and let out a soft "hum" as a response. After receiving the affirmative reply, the person on the other end said they would send someone to deliver the items to Harvey's office, then hung up directly. Harvey stood up and paced back and forth in his office. The thought of that man being by Lillian's side made him want to rush over immediately and drive him away. However, doing so would only further shatter their already strained relationship. Harvey could only forcibly suppress those impulsive thoughts. Anxiously awaiting Lillian's letter, before long, the letter was delivered into Harvey's hands. Harvey looked at Lillian's handwriting on it, familiar. Yet feeling like a lifetime had passed, he took a deep breath, then slowly opened it. Inside was an application form, detailing her participation in an overseas peacekeeping mission, along with a waiver of liability acknowledging the risks, signed by Lillian at the bottom. Harvey could hardly believe his eyes. He had thought Lillian was just hiding, that she only wanted him and Julian to realize how important she was in their lives, and that she would return once they came to their senses. But this letter shattered all of Harvey's delusions. He never expected Lillian to make such a choice. Especially when he saw the words "at your own risk" on it, he nearly broke down. Why would she make such a major life decision without discussing it with her family? Didn't she know that if something happened to her, it would cause so many people heartache and sorrow? But soon, Harvey's boiling blood turned ice cold as he remembered that time. He had been immersed in the joy of reuniting with Mandy after a long separation, still chasing the so-called romance of a first love rekindled, while things like family and responsibility had long been thrown to the wind. Even to make Mandy happy, he had deliberately humiliated Lillian in front of everyone, making her feel embarrassed and ashamed in front of so many people. What right did he have to expect Lillian to consider him or this family when making her decision? Clearly, this family had abandoned her first. The so-called home had not sheltered Lillian from the storm but had instead brought the greatest storm of her life. If it weren't for being utterly disappointed, even desperate, with her husband and child, Lillian would never have made such a high-risk choice. Harvey's hand fell limply. The letter in his hand fluttering to the ground, he didn't pick it up, just stared vacantly ahead. So it turns out, not all prodigal sons have someone waiting for them in the distance. At the very least, Lillian wouldn't be that person. Harvey's heart felt hollow, as if a piece of it was missing. Someone he thought was insignificant turned out to be so unbearable to lose. Harvey didn't even know how to explain to Julian that Lillian wouldn't be coming back to see him. And whether they could even meet again in the future was uncertain. Harvey could only tell Julian in the end that Lillian had gone abroad to study and wouldn't be back for now, and that they shouldn't disturb her, just wait patiently for her to calm down and return. Julian was very disappointed, but still sensibly agreed to these requests. Harvey then gathered all the things Lillian had left behind that she hadn't had time to take with her, carefully going through them one by one. He suddenly wanted to know what Lillian had been doing all these years when he wasn't paying attention. Lillian left in a hurry back then, so she only took the most important documents and files, leaving quite a few things behind. Harvey pulled out one of the notebooks, saw his name written on it, and immediately opened it to see what was inside. Opening it, he found the dates were from long ago, and there weren't many messy notes on it, just records of his physical condition on certain days. Along with some corresponding prescriptions below. Many of the prescriptions were for dietary remedies, and from the notes, it was clear they had been meticulously revised many times. Some involved replacing certain herbs, while others adjusted the dosages. Every prescription drafted for Harvey had been revised over and over in this way before finding the most suitable ratio for his constitution. Harvey couldn't quite describe the feeling in his heart. He had always thought Lillian's efforts in brewing medicine and simmering soups at home were merely self-gratification, and that he was just humoring her by drinking them to save face. Little did he expect that such seemingly ordinary things each concealed her meticulous care. All these years, even with pitifully little positive feedback, she never once thought of shirking her responsibilities. Harvey suddenly felt too ashamed to face it. He had shamelessly enjoyed Lillian's care for so many years while looking down on it, even to the point where Julian could sense his belittling attitude toward Lillian, growing increasingly disrespectful toward Lillian. Harvey suddenly felt lost at this moment. He desperately wanted to find a way to make amends, but couldn't locate Lillian anywhere. After learning that she had gone abroad for a secret peacekeeping mission, he still refused to give up. He hired private investigators overseas to track her down, but to no avail. Under the deliberate secrecy of the authorities, individuals simply couldn't uncover even the slightest clue, and to make matters worse, he and Lillian had already completed their divorce proceedings, leaving him unable to request information about Lillian from the authorities as a family member. Harvey stayed in the home filled with Lillian's traces. Feeling her presence slowly fade away day by day, gradually becoming gaunt and haggard, it wasn't that he was deliberately ruining his health because he had lost Lillian, but every night when he lay in the bed he once shared with Lillian, without her familiar warmth, he would involuntarily suffer from insomnia. Every day, looking at the tableware that Lillian had carefully selected, the food he ate no longer tasted the same and felt as bland as chewing wax. Over time, Harvey felt as if all his energy had been drained. Even doing nothing all day left him utterly exhausted. To find a moment of peace in his heart, Harvey began to change his previous hands-off approach. He made time every day to accompany Julian, and also contributed large sums to the charity foundation established by Lillian. Additionally, He assigned several of his top employees to assist with the foundation's operations, Lillian when she would return, or if she would return at all. He had no way of knowing. The only thing he could do was to take care of everything she had valued most before she left. This way, at least when Lillian returned one day, she wouldn't only see his flaws, she might also remember a little of his goodness. 3 years later, Lillian boarded the flight back to her home country. Gazing out the window at the scenery shrinking below, she was filled with deep emotions. At first, she really did think about going to a place where no one could find her. Staying away from Harvey and Julian, the father and son who had broken her heart, just to be alone and quiet. But after coming here, experiencing so many things, and having several near-death encounters, those past troubles that once tormented and pained her now seemed like fleeting clouds, insignificant and unimportant. Lillian lowered her head and looked at the slightly rough crystal necklace in her hand. It was a gift from an elderly local woman she had helped. Given in gratitude for bringing life-saving medicine in time, though not valuable, every time she saw it, it reminded Lillian of the satisfaction and fulfillment she felt back then. And there were many, many more things like this in her backpack. Lillian smiled faintly, genuinely feeling that leaving had been absolutely the right decision. At the very least, let her understand that her world can be vast, and there are many, many things she can achieve, not just revolving around Harvey and Julian. With her space confined only to that tiny kitchen at Kyle's house, thinking of the father and son, Lillian's smile faded a little. She had been away for so long that Mandy had probably become Harvey's lawfully wedded wife, and Julian had likely fully accepted a new mother by now. As for Harvey, she had already come to terms with it. But Julian, after all, he was the child she carried for 10 months, even putting aside maternal feelings. She still felt an inescapable responsibility toward Julian. She wondered if Julian would become even more reckless under Mandy's influence. Just thinking about it, Lillian couldn't help but get a headache. However, the plane took off soon enough. Lillian stopped dwelling on these thoughts. She would find out when the time came. If Julian was doing fine, she could rest assured and, naturally, wouldn't disturb their lives. After more than 10 hours of long-haul flight, the plane landed at the airport. As soon as they stepped off the plane, the group received a grand welcome, and there were even official reporters there to interview them. Lillian wasn't very comfortable with cameras. Her previous experience of being cyberbullied had left her with psychological trauma towards media and such. She found an unnoticed corner to stand in for a while, and only after following the procedures did she collect her luggage and leave. Lillian thought she had only briefly appeared in the corner and would surely go unnoticed. Unexpectedly, when netizens clicked into the news video intending to praise their country's peacekeeping heroes, someone with sharp eyes spotted Lillian. "Hey, why does this woman in the far right corner look so familiar? Have I seen her somewhere before? I think I have some impression of that. That's the one, Harvey's ex-wife. The original spouse who was left with nothing after being replaced by a mistress." Originally, after 3 years, most people had already begun to forget the once widely discussed incident, but Lillian's appearance in such a role has once again drawn a lot of attention. Along with it, the good deeds that Harvey had done back then were dug up again, successfully landing him back on the hot search and earning him another round of criticism. When Harvey received the news, he was somewhat baffled. He had been keeping a low profile recently, and with more trending events emerging later on, he hadn't experienced this kind of public criticism in a long time. He clicked on the Twitter post where someone was insulting him, wanting to see if it was a competitor stirring up public opinion, but in a video shared by that person, he caught sight of Lillian's figure. The seated man abruptly sprang to his feet. Completely unaware that his chair had toppled over behind him due to his sudden movement, his eyes were fixed intently on the small face on his phone screen. It was Lillian. She had really returned. After 3 years, Harvey had gradually grown accustomed to life without Lillian. However, the occasional bouts of stomach pain and Julian's occasional longing for a mother's love reminded him of everything that had happened before, but these thoughts were forcibly suppressed by Harvey. He was afraid that if, by any chance, Lillian didn't return, how would he cope? If that were the case, even if he hadn't directly caused her death, he would still feel inextricably linked to it. That kind of outcome was something even Harvey dared not face. Fortunately, the worst outcome did not happen. Lillian returned, safe and sound. Harvey gazed almost greedily at that brief, fleeting shot. She had become even thinner than before she left, with her hair cut short. Her fair complexion tanned to a healthy wheat color, but her eyes shone remarkably bright, revealing the vibrant vitality within. Learning that Lillian was doing relatively well, Harvey's heart settled. Just then, his assistant entered and asked Harvey if he wanted to address the online public opinion. Harvey shook his head. "No need, let it be. Just review and make sure there's no content attacking Julian." The assistant was somewhat taken aback. But Harvey truly didn't care about those online criticisms anymore. In fact, he even felt somewhat grateful to these enthusiastic netizens who had discovered Lillian first and then immediately criticized him, which allowed him to learn so quickly about her return to the country. Harvey immediately wanted to contact Lillian, but when he found that almost memorized phone number and was about to dial it, he stopped his hand. The man who had always been fearless was now very worried about being disappointed once again. He wasn't afraid of Lillian scolding him, but he was afraid she would ignore him like before, or even worse, afraid she might choose to leave again because she couldn't stand the harassment. Harvey took a deep breath, suppressing the urge to contact Lillian, deciding to wait and observe first. At the very least, he should give Lillian some space and not make her feel like he was constantly monitoring her every move. Lillian had little awareness of the storm she had stirred up online. Having finally returned to the country, she only felt like she didn't know how to do anything anymore. All the novel apps and high-tech devices left her dazzled and overwhelmed. Therefore, she didn't have time to worry about anything else, and was just trying hard to keep up with the trends of the times. It wasn't until she finally understood all the things she had missed over the years Lillian that she found the time to visit the charity foundation she had established. The foundation staff, upon learning of her return, warmly welcomed her and presented the accounts and achievements of their operations over the years. Lillian, looking at the thick list of beneficiaries, the heavy stone in her heart finally settled. She was actually a complete novice in these matters and had worried about whether she would do poorly and waste the assets left to her by old Master Shen. Now, seeing that she had truly helped so many sick children, she felt at ease. Lillian glanced at the accounts. The more specific details were a bit beyond her understanding, but she noticed that every month, a substantial amount of external funds flowed in. Curious, she asked, "What is this?" "This is a donation from Mr. Shen." "No, from a gentleman to the foundation," as the staff member spoke. They looked somewhat embarrassed. Lillian frowned and asked, "Is there something you can't say?" "No, not at all, it's just, the donor is Harvey, Mr. Shen. I was just worried that hearing his name might upset you, but we thought accepting this money could help more people, so we didn't refuse." Lillian, upon hearing this, nodded without much of a reaction, but she couldn't help feeling a bit puzzled inside. Why would Harvey be so kind? Was he planning to cause trouble under the guise of donating money to frame her again? Although she thought it unlikely to be that trivial, given all that had happened before. Lillian had absolutely no trust in Harvey as a person. Lillian worried about complications. She directly contacted the lawyer who had helped her with previous matters. After learning of her concerns, the lawyer suggested that she bring him along as a professional to work out all the details in a contract with Harvey, to avoid any unnecessary trouble in the future. Lillian immediately accepted the suggestion. After retrieving the previously kept SIM card, she inserted it into her newly purchased phone. As soon as she turned on her phone, various text messages and missed call notifications kept popping up. Lillian opted for out of sight, out of mind, deleting them all with one tap before finding Harvey's number and dialing it. Harvey was in the middle of a company meeting when he felt his phone vibrate, initially annoyed by the interruption, but when he saw the name on the screen, he completely forgot what he was doing. Immediately gestured that he had to take the call, and left a room full of people exchanging bewildered looks. Everyone knew Mr. Harvey was a notorious workaholic. Who on earth could make him abandon his work to take a call? Harvey stepped out quickly, but his heart was beating even faster. Suppressing his excitement, he promptly answered the call. "Hello." Harvey tried hard to keep his voice calm. "Is this Harvey?" "This is Lillian," Lillian said in her usual tone. "There are some matters I'd like to discuss with you. Would you have time to meet?" "Yes, whenever you'd like to meet, I'm available." "Then let's make it this afternoon. I'll send you the address in a moment." Lillian, after saying that, she hung up the phone and immediately sent the address of the law firm over. Harvey, after receiving the address, he quickly saved it, returned to the conference room to announce the meeting was postponed, and then called Julian. "Julian, your mother has returned to the country. Do you want to go see her?" Julian was stunned for a moment, feeling happy inside, but then he lowered his head and mumbled, "I want to see Mom, but, will she want to see me?" Julian had gradually come to realize how important his mother was to him during these years. Without Lillian by his side taking care of him, how could a child not feel envious when seeing other children being taken out to play by their fathers and mothers, at the same time? As he grew older, he also became aware of how excessive his behavior had been, publicly belittling his own mother just for momentary satisfaction. However, he no longer had the chance to make up for his past mistakes, and could only accept the fact that he would never have his mother by his side again. So when suddenly told that Lillian had returned, Julian wanted to see her, but was also afraid that his mother might still be angry with him and wouldn't want to see him at all. Of course. You're her child, the person closest to her in this world. How could she not want to see you? Harvey felt terrible too. Over the years, without a mother's care, Julian had become prematurely mature for his age, but he couldn't blame Lillian for her decision to leave. He could only blame himself for being blind and foolish back then. "All right, I'll go," Julian agreed. So Harvey went straight to the school to pick him up. He then took Julian to buy a new set of clothes, carefully dressed him up, and finally went to the address Lillian had sent. However, upon arriving at the location, he discovered it was a law firm. Harvey couldn't help but frown tightly. Why would they meet in such a place? He couldn't help but think of the lawyer who had full authority to handle Lillian's affairs. Could it be that they were really in that kind of relationship? At this thought, Harvey unconsciously tightened his grip on Julian's hand. It wasn't until Julian let out a cry of pain that he snapped back to reality and forced a smile, saying, "Sorry, Dad's a bit nervous, let's go in." Harvey held Julian's hand and walked in. After giving his name at the front desk, they were led to a conference room. As soon as he pushed the door open, he saw Lillian sitting there with a few documents in her hand. Behind her was the lawyer, the two sitting quite a distance apart, clearly just a typical professional relationship, which made Harvey breathe a sigh of relief. Julian, upon seeing Lillian, couldn't hold back the tears welling up in his eyes and softly called out, "Mom." Lillian looked up and, seeing Julian, was momentarily stunned. That form of address felt like a lifetime ago to Lillian. That little one who used to cling to her every day, calling her mom over and over, had stopped calling her that after Mandy appeared. He even refused to acknowledge her in front of everyone. It was impossible not to feel hurt, but seeing Julian like this, Lillian still softened her heart. "Yes, you've grown a lot taller. How have you been lately?" Julian looked at Harvey, and seeing him nod, he finally mustered the courage to walk over and told Lillian about his recent situation. Julian had already started elementary school, was doing well academically, and got along nicely with his teachers and classmates. Learning that he was doing well, Lillian felt relieved. She reached out to pat Julian's head, but then stopped awkwardly, probably because the psychological trauma left by Julian and Harvey was too deep. She now feels somewhat resistant to such intimate gestures. Harvey noticed this, and his eyes dimmed a bit more. Then, however, he felt relieved. If he had been hurt so badly by his family, he wouldn't trust anyone either. "Julian, please step out for a moment. I need to have a word with your mother." Julian heard this and, though reluctant, obediently left. Harvey finally spoke. "What did you want to discuss by calling me?" Lillian snapped back to reality. Her emotions having calmed down, she placed the document in front of Harvey and said, "Mr. Shin, I only found out after returning to the country that you made numerous donations to my foundation. I don't know your intentions, but to avoid unnecessary risks, I'd like to clarify some details with you. For instance, are these donated assets your marital property? Could they potentially lead to disputes over property in the future?" Harvey frowned deeply. "Wait, what do you mean by marital property? I'm not married." Lillian was taken aback for a moment. She thought Harvey would go to any lengths for Mandy to make her step aside, and had long been eager to marry her, but it turns out, that wasn't the case. It seems their passionate love couldn't withstand the ravages of life after all. Harvey pressed his lips together. "There's something I must clarify with you first. After you left, I checked the surveillance and discovered it was Mandy who gave Julian sleeping pills and put him in your car. As for the media frenzy back then, she also hired trolls to fuel the rumors. I sued her and had her sent to prison. I haven't paid any attention to what happened to her after she was released. I misunderstood you before. I've been trying to contact you ever since, wanting to apologize, but I couldn't find you. Later, I found out you went abroad for a secret mission." Harvey explained urgently, afraid that if he wasn't clear enough, Lillian would continue to misunderstand. Lillian didn't know how she felt upon hearing this. Perhaps because too much time had passed, she no longer had the urgent desire to prove her innocence as she once did, and simply accepted the fact calmly. "Lillian, I'm sorry, I was too foolish and irresponsible before, which made you suffer such injustice. I've always wanted to say this to you. I don't know if you can forgive me." Harvey seizing this opportunity, he finally managed to voice his apology. Got it." But Lillian only responded like this, neither forgiving nor causing further trouble. She was unwilling to dwell on the past, but that didn't mean she was ready to forgive. That hurt, she would remember it forever and never step into it again. Harvey wanted to say more. At the very least, he hoped to see Lillian show some different reaction, but Lillian didn't give him the chance. Lillian brought the conversation back to the main issue. "I've heard your explanation. Since the law has already punished her, there's no need to say more. Now, what we need to discuss isn't these past matters. Regarding your donation to the charity fund, let's first clarify the rights and responsibilities involved. I don't want any future issues that might land me in the police station with some strange charges." span, Lillian no longer wanted to engage in pretense with Harvey and directly stated her intentions. Harvey listened to her words, feeling his blood run cold. It flowed inch by inch, yet his body seemed to freeze, stiff and unable to move. Was she actually afraid that he would tamper with her charity fund and harm her again? Then what did all the effort he had put in over the years amount to? Do you think I would do something like that? Lillian looked at Harvey's hurt expression and frowned. Wouldn't you? I only believe in evidence and the law. I won't allow myself to take any unnecessary risks anymore. After speaking, Lillian pointed at the two cameras behind her, her meaning perfectly clear. Because she didn't trust Harvey, even when interacting with him, there had to be cameras and other witnesses present. This was the biggest lesson she had learned after being slandered without limits by Harvey and Mandy. Harvey suddenly lost the strength to argue. He just felt utterly ridiculous. His past shameless actions had finally turned into a boomerang, striking him hard in the face. He had single-handedly destroyed his image in Lillian's heart, along with her last shred of trust in him. Yes, when faced with someone who would give false testimony just to send her to the police station. Her caution was completely justified. The following conversation went smoothly. Harvey didn't even know how he managed to cooperate with the lawyer and finalize all the details. He only felt that his body was there, but his soul seemed to have flown away somewhere. When everything was finally signed, Harvey couldn't even find the excitement he had felt before. He just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible, to get away from this place that made him feel utterly ashamed. Julian waited obediently outside for him to come out, but only saw Harvey looking completely devastated. Dad, does Mom still hate us? Julian's voice brought back a bit of Harvey's senses, and he forced a faint smile. Hate? Not really, it's just that in Lillian's eyes, their position might be even lower than that of a passing stranger. At least strangers wouldn't hurt her without any bottom line. But what could Harvey say? The bitter fruit was sown by his own hands. What right did he have to oppose Lillian's prejudice? No, how could she possibly hate you? Harvey patted Julian on the head, and then led him away, but upon returning, perhaps due to intense emotional turmoil, Harvey's previously stable stomach condition suddenly flared up severely. That very night, he was hospitalized due to a stomach hemorrhage, perhaps because he had been relying on medication to suppress the symptoms for years without proper recuperation. This episode was exceptionally severe. He was rushed to the ICU for emergency treatment and even received a critical condition notice. Lillian only learned the news in the middle of the night when she received a call from Julian. Julian, although he was considered a precocious child, he still panicked in this situation, and his first thought was to find an adult. Lillian, after offering a few words of comfort, she showed no intention of going to visit him. Harvey, with his status, there would be no shortage of people fussing over him, so she saw no need to add to the crowd. Therefore, when Harvey woke up after being resuscitated, he opened his eyes to see an overjoyed Julian and his assistant. He instinctively looked for Lillian, but found no trace of her, and couldn't help but feel disappointed. Harvey forced himself not to show any emotion. Only after everyone had left did he take out his phone and start typing a message. Lillian, I'm at the hospital. My stomach hurts so much. Halfway through writing, he deleted it and changed it to, Lillian, I want to discuss Julian's custody with you. Mentioning the stomach pain was his genuine feeling. But Harvey also knew that Lillian probably didn't care whether he was in pain or not anymore, so he had to use Julian's name to ask her to come. Call him despicable if you will. But in this moment of utmost vulnerability, Harvey truly longed to see Lillian. Lillian saw the message and, as expected, agreed. Harvey took advantage of the time before her arrival to tidy up, making sure he didn't look too haggard, lest Lillian find it bothersome. Lillian arrived quickly, and when she saw Harvey lying weakly in the hospital bed, she was momentarily taken aback. Such a Harvey was all too familiar to her. After all, she had taken care of him for so many years. Harvey saw Lillian's eyes soften, as if she was reminiscing about their past, and he was overjoyed. Lowering his voice, he said, Lillian, without you, I really can't take care of myself. It was my fault before. Can we? Lillian suddenly snapped back to reality. She looked at Harvey and smiled. You know, back then, when I was isolated at school because of my shabby clothes, it was you who happened to pass by and chased them away. After that, no one ever bullied me again. At that time, I thought you were the most handsome boy in the world. If I ever had the chance, I would do anything to repay you. Harvey was stunned. He truly couldn't remember such a thing. Perhaps it was just a casual remark he had made back then, yet Lillian had remembered it for so long. She really was a person of deep affection. Lillian didn't listen to what he was saying and continued on her own. So, when I found out you had been in a car accident and turned into a vegetable, I didn't hesitate for a moment and gave up the opportunity to study abroad to take care of you. Back then, through all those hopeless days and nights, even when your family had given up on you, I still thought to hold on a little longer, in case you might wake up. I waited, and you did wake up, but in the end, you gave our marriage such an undignified conclusion." Lillian smiled self-deprecatingly. "If you had fallen in love with someone else, you could have told me. I wouldn't have clung to you, but what you did completely destroyed the young man I once knew in my heart, and shattered the reason I had held on for so many years. I have never regretted my choices, whether it was marrying you or leaving you, never regretted it, even for Julian's sake. Aren't you willing to give it another try? I know I wronged you before, but if you're willing to give me another chance, I'll prove my determination to you." Lillian gave Harvey a deep look. "Actually, what you need isn't Lillian specifically, but rather a woman who'll silently support you from behind, take care of you, and let you rest easy. Anyone would do. It's just that the Mandy you're pursuing would never lower herself to do these things for you, which is why you miss having me around. But I've seen how vast the sky can be, learned about my own limitless potential, and I won't be so foolish as to sacrifice myself for others' benefit anymore," as if recalling her experiences abroad. Lillian's eyes shone with a brightness that made Harvey unable to meet her gaze. Harvey wanted to refute, but didn't know how. At the very least, he knew clearly that without the constraints from him and Julian, Lillian lived more freely and unrestrained. What right did he have to make her continue being the caged canary, confined to a life revolving only around them? If it were the old Harvey, he would probably stop at nothing to keep her, even if it meant forcing her. But now he couldn't bring himself to do it. After all these years, he finally understood how to love someone, but that person would never give him another chance. "I understand, I was being presumptuous this time. It won't happen again." Harvey lowered his gaze, no longer looking at Lillian's expression. Lillian sighed in relief. Harvey would only become a constant annoyance if he kept pestering her. It was better for everyone if he was willing to let go. "Then take good care of yourself. I won't disturb you any further." Lillian left. Harvey watched her figure disappear from sight, silently bidding her farewell in his heart. Never see you again. Many years later, Harvey's funeral, Julian invited Lillian. Over the years, Harvey never remarried, nor did he disturb Lillian's life again. Instead, devoting himself to helping her develop her scientific career, Lillian gazed at the face of the young man in the photograph, lost in thought. At this moment, it seemed as if so much from before had faded away, leaving only that silhouette from back then, which she had remembered for a lifetime. "At that time, he said that no one was allowed to bully her, or else they would be going against me.